The day before my wedding, I drove to my future mother-in-law's apartment. As I was leaving, I forgot my cardigan. When I went back to get it, in that exact moment, I decided to call off the wedding. I was already halfway from Lincoln Park, where Caleb lived, to my rented apartment in Wicker Park. When I suddenly remembered the cardigan, a cold shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't from the chilly Chicago evening wind slipping through the crack in my car window, but because of that sweater. This was no ordinary piece of clothing. It was a beige cardigan with a soft, open V-neck. On the edge of the collar, my mother had painstakingly embroidered two small flowers, hand-stitched, thread by thread, as if she had woven her entire life into it. I slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched to a halt, leaving a short mark on the asphalt. The headlights of the car behind me flashed. Someone honked. I awkwardly raised a hand in an apologetic gesture, glancing in the rearview mirror, then pulled into the turning lane. I changed direction like someone who had just lost their heart in the middle of the road. My wedding was tomorrow. I should have been home already, getting to bed early so the makeup artist could come to the hotel first thing in the morning. I needed to look my best, maintain my excitement, and protect my dream of being a bride. Yet here I was, returning to Caleb's apartment just for a sweater. It sounds absurd, doesn't it? But deep down, I felt it was the last thread connecting me to my mother, to her blessing, to the kindness she had shown me, to all her love. Before I left my family home, my mom had smiled, her trembling hands smoothing the collar of that cardigan. "Sweetheart, tomorrow you'll be someone's wife. Wear this to keep warm." I embroidered these two flowers as a symbol of two words: peace and security. She said this as her eyes were already starting to dim, her breath growing weak. Mom passed away last year, on a cold night just like this one. I cried until my voice was gone. Afterward, I lived like a mute, knowing only that I had to work, save, and try to buy a home so Mom could be at peace, even though she was gone. That cardigan was a memento, her message, something I couldn't just leave behind in someone else's house, even if that house was to become my husband's home tomorrow. The car stopped in front of Caleb's family's apartment building in Lincoln Park. A pale yellow light illuminated the hallway. The wind rustled through the trees, making the leaves whisper. I got out. My heels made a dry clicking sound on the stone floor. In the glass of the lobby door, I saw my reflection. Slightly wavy hair, dusty rose-colored lips, eyes with a thin line of eyeliner. A girl about to become a bride. I told myself, "Alara, calm down. Tomorrow is your happy day." I got into the elevator. In the mirrored wall, I saw myself smile. It wasn't a radiant smile, but a forced one, meant to reassure myself. I had prepared everything for tomorrow's wedding as if I were preparing for a new life. The wedding dress, which Mom and I had chosen 3 months ago, cost $8,000. Mom had said it was a lot. I told her you only get married once. I wanted to look beautiful. Mom had smiled then, her eyes welling up with tears. My daughter knows how to take care of herself now. The ballroom at the hotel had been booked by Caleb far in advance, the deposit paid as a guarantee. The condo for our honeymoon and our life together was in River North and was in my name. It was 1,300 square feet, near a good international school, a hospital, and a park. I had saved money from my job for 6 years, plus the inheritance from my mother. It was just enough for the down payment and to secure a mortgage from the bank. Caleb had been so gentle then, saying, "It's fine that it's in your name. We're going to be husband and wife. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours." I believed him. I believed him with all my youth. I believed in our 5-year relationship. I met him 5 years ago at a corporate retreat. I had just been promoted to project manager, and he was the new lead engineer. That day, I won the latest model laptop in a raffle. Caleb took the initiative to help me carry the box. He smiled. "Congratulations," he said. His smile then was like a gentle, refreshing breeze that makes you soften before you can put your guard up. The first time I met his mother, Brenda, she grabbed my hands, her voice as sweet as honey. "I like you so much, dear. You seem like a good, hard-working girl. You don't wear a lot of flashy makeup. Girls today just know how to preen in front of a mirror and can't take care of a family." I was moved to hear that, thinking I had found a wonderful family. And Chloe, Caleb's younger sister who was still in college then, cheerfully called me by my name, telling me about her dreams and plans, saying she wanted to be an independent woman like me in the future. I even bought her a few books on career development as a gift. These images flashed through my mind like a fast-forwarded movie. When the elevator chimed softly and opened on Caleb's floor, I stepped into the hallway. The motion sensor light flicked on. I took a deep breath in front of their apartment door. All I had to do was ring the bell, smile, and say, "I'm so sorry." Alara left her cardigan. Then I would grab it and go home. Simple. I raised my hand. My finger hovered over the doorbell, and in that exact second, a voice came from inside. Brenda's voice was loud and clear, as if she were on the phone with someone, completely unconcerned with being discreet. "Oh, that Alara just left. My God, her smile makes me sick. So completely fake." I froze. My finger felt like it was frozen in midair. Another, younger voice replied with a hint of mockery. "Mom, you're a master actress." I almost burst out laughing when you were standing in front of her. I swallowed hard. A cold sweat immediately broke out on my back. A nonsensical question spun in my head. Why are they talking like that? Inside, Brenda let out a loud, satisfied laugh, the laugh of someone who had just won a card game. "You have to play the part, my dear. If we didn't, how would we have gotten our hands on that condo of hers in River North? That's an exclusive area near the International School, 1,300 square feet. It's worth at least $1 million now, you know?" Chloe's voice sounded enthusiastic, like a child who had just received a gift. "And after the wedding, the condo will belong to Caleb, right? Then getting the deed transferred will be easy. Then we'll sell it. The money will be enough for Caleb to start his own company. Right, Mom?" My ears were ringing. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would shatter my ribs. Transferred, sold, each word was like a slap. Not to my face, but directly to my dignity. Brenda continued, her voice growing more carefree, as if I were just a commodity whose value they were assessing, not just the condo. Her mother was some kind of businesswoman, apparently. She must have left behind a lot of savings. "After the wedding, we'll tell Caleb to sweet-talk her a bit, so we're the ones holding the purse strings. Chloe wants to buy a car. I want to buy a house. Mom will help you with that." I leaned against the hallway wall, my legs giving out from under me. Cold sweat dripped down my back, soaking through my blouse. My head felt icy. Brenda's sweet words from earlier today suddenly turned into something disgusting. Her friendly smile, her warm handshake. The sentence, "I treat you like my own daughter," suddenly became a cheap drama. Inside, their laughter and calculated scheming could still be heard clearly. Meanwhile, I stood petrified outside their door. My hand was still hovering in front of the doorbell, unable to press it. I leaned against the cold hallway wall, feeling as though my entire world had just been turned upside down before my very eyes. The wooden door in front of me didn't open, but the words from within pierced my ears, stabbing my heart more sharply than any knife. It turned out that 5 years of love, the family dinners, the warm handshakes, it was all just a meticulously planned performance, and I was the most naive character in it. Brenda's voice was still echoing from inside, completely unaware that her future daughter-in-law was hearing every word behind that door. "And one more thing. At the wedding tomorrow, Chloe, you pretend to cry a little, okay? Say how much Caleb loves Alara, how much he cares. Let the relatives from both sides see that Caleb is a responsible, family-loving man." Chloe giggled. "Mom, don't worry. I've got it all planned. During the toasts, I'll purposely pour Alara more alcohol. When she's drunk, she'll be easier to talk to." I shuddered. Not from the cold, but from disgust. In that moment, something inside me shattered into 1,000 pieces. This wasn't love. It was an illusion. An illusion that if I were sincere enough, patient enough, and loved enough, I would gain a good family in return. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. No tears came. Maybe the shock was too great, or maybe the pain had surpassed the ability to cry. There were no longer any why questions in my head, only one very clear thought. I have to save myself. I opened my purse. My hands were trembling, but my mind was incredibly sober. I took out my phone. My fingers flew across the screen, turning on the voice recorder. Slowly, I bent down, bringing the phone close to the crack under the door. Inside, the conversation continued, growing even more brazen. "After her wedding, our problems will be over. That girl is proper and afraid of gossip. Even if she wanted to cause trouble later, she wouldn't dare." "Exactly, Mom. People on the outside will only see that our family is good. If she's the one who asks for a divorce, everyone will tear her apart for being an ungrateful woman." I heard every word. My heart felt like it was being crushed, but my hand held the phone steady. 3 minutes passed like 3 years. When I decided I had enough, I stopped the recording and put the phone back in my purse. I stood up straight, no longer trembling. My mind was crystal clear at that moment. I would never walk through that door as a daughter-in-law. I turned and walked quickly towards the elevator. My heels clicked on the stone floor, louder than when I had arrived. Each step seemed to trample on the fragments of my own past. In the elevator, the mirror reflected my pale face, lips pressed tightly together, eyes empty but cold. I looked at myself and suddenly let out a hollow laugh, tinged with bitterness. Alara, you are truly a great fool, I thought. But at least you woke up in time. The car sped through the night. The streetlights of Chicago became blurred streaks of light. It was then that I remembered the cardigan, my mother's embroidered sweater, still lying in that house. I gripped the steering wheel. A great battle was raging in my heart. I wanted to go back and get it. I wanted to so badly, but the thought of having to ring that doorbell and face those people made me sick to my stomach. It doesn't matter, I mumbled. Not anymore. A cardigan that had been in that house was already stained. Not with dust, but with the nature of their hearts. I turned the steering wheel, not to go back, but to drive straight to my rented apartment in Wicker Park. A 320-square-foot apartment with a small bedroom and a living room combined with a kitchenette. But at that moment, it was the only place I felt safe. As I opened the door, a cool breeze from inside greeted me. I turned on the light. On a hanger hung my snow-white wedding dress, swaying slightly in the wind from the window. The moonlight streaming in made the layers of tulle reflect a cold glow, like a beautiful but very fragile dream. I stared at it for a long time, then laughed. Look at you, I said softly. So beautiful. So beautiful you almost buried me alive. I walked to the window, pulling the curtain back slightly. The wind from outside carried the damp smell of the city streets. I took a pack of cigarettes out of a drawer. I hadn't smoked in a long time, but tonight, I needed something to keep my mind sharp. The tobacco smoke filled the air, stinging the corners of my eyes. In the haze, old memories returned. 5 years ago, Caleb once told me, Alara, if I were poor one day, would you look down on me? I had laughed then, patting him on the shoulder. If we're poor, we'll work together for our success. I don't need wealth. What's important is that you're a good person. Looking back now, my words felt so naive. Those people weren't materially poor. They were poor in character. My phone vibrated, pulling me back to reality. Caleb's name was on the screen. I stared at it for a long time before finally answering. Alara, are you home yet? Caleb's voice was gentle, as always. You didn't text. I was worried. I leaned against the wall, my voice so calm it surprised me. I'm home. Oh, good. Was today at my mom's tiring for you? I almost burst out laughing. Yes, I answered curtly. Caleb chuckled. My mom really likes you. She was praising you constantly, Alara. We're getting married tomorrow. I looked at the cigarette smoke slowly dissolving in the air. Caleb, I said slowly. Can I ask you something? Of course. Ask away. Do you love me? There was a moment of silence on the other end. Why are you suddenly asking that? He laughed awkwardly. Of course I love you. If I didn't, why would I be marrying you? Oh, I replied, just asking. Stop overthinking things. It's normal to be stressed before the wedding. Get some sleep. We have to be up early tomorrow. Okay, I said and hung up. I placed the phone on the sofa. My heart didn't ache. It was just cold. The 3-minute recording in my purse felt like a block of ice, but it was also the only thing keeping me from collapsing. I looked at the wedding dress again, then around my small room. All of this was the fruit of my own hard work. The job, the money, this apartment, my dreams. It's okay, I told myself. Tomorrow may not be a wedding day, but it will be the day I start living for myself. Dear listeners, if you are following my story and you sympathize with me, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel to accompany me on the journey ahead. Your support is my motivation to continue speaking the truth, to tell the story of the rebirth of a woman who almost gave her entire life to the wrong people. I stubbed out the cigarette, turned off the light, and got into bed. The Chicago night was still long, but in my heart, a cold dawn was slowly beginning to break. I barely slept that night, not because of tears or unbearable pain, but because my mind was too sober. Frighteningly sober. Every detail, every word, every fake smile from Caleb's family replayed like a slow-motion film on a loop that was impossible to escape. The familiar ceiling of my rented room, the dim yellow glow of the lamp, the sound of traffic outside growing sparser as the night wore on. I lay there, my hand on my chest, feeling the steady beat of my heart. It was strange. This heart was still beating, still alive, only it no longer held the enthusiastic anticipation for tomorrow that it had before. Tomorrow was supposed to be my wedding day. I sat up, turned on the desk lamp, and pulled out the bottom drawer of the old wooden table. Inside was a neatly arranged file of documents: the deed to the condo in River North, issued in my name, my employment contract, pay stubs from my 6 years of work, and a small brown envelope. Inside was the debit card my mother had left me. My hand trembled slightly as I touched it. I remembered my mom holding my hand, her voice weak but very clear. "Alara, keep this money safe. Don't tell your husband's family about it, or I won't be able to rest in peace." I had dismissed it then, even laughed, saying, "Mom, you think too much." Remembering it now, I just wanted to go back to that moment, hug her tightly, and say, "I'm sorry I didn't believe you." I picked up my phone, put in my earbuds, and played the recording again. Oh, that Alara just left. My God, her smile makes me sick. Brenda's voice echoed in the quiet room, clear down to every sigh. I didn't fast forward or turn it off. I forced myself to listen to the very end, as a way to completely cut off any path of retreat. After listening, I turned off the phone and placed it on the desk. There were no more doubts. No more maybe I misunderstood. No more maybe his mother just misspoke. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a conspiracy. I stood up and walked over to the hanger. The white wedding dress was still there, silent and alien. I touched its soft fabric and suddenly wanted to laugh. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "It's not your fault. I just chose the wrong person to stand by my side." I hung the dress back in its place and returned to the desk. For the first time that night, I opened my laptop, not for work, but to look for my Aunt Helen's phone number. Aunt Helen was my mother's best friend and a civil litigation attorney. When Mom was still alive, she often came to our house and always told me, "This child needs to be strong in the future. Don't let anyone push you around." I looked at the clock. It was 5:00 a.m. My hand paused over the keyboard. I hesitated for a moment, then closed the laptop. It wasn't time yet. I had to think with extreme clarity. What would happen if I called off the wedding? Caleb's family would be furious. Relatives on both sides would start whispering. Friends and colleagues would ask questions. There would be those who sympathized, those who blamed, and those who would just watch from the sidelines and judge. But if I didn't call it off, I would lose my home, my money, and my self-respect. Compared to that, what were a few rumors? I asked myself a very simple question. If Mom were alive, what would she want me to do? The answer came faster than I expected. She would want me to live well, for myself. The sky was slowly lightening. Pale light slipped through the gaps in the curtains, bathing the room in soft shades of gray. I stood up and went to the bathroom. Cold water on my face helped me wake up completely. Looking at myself in the mirror, I realized my gaze had changed. It was no longer naive, no longer full of dreams. There was only a calm strength and determination. "All right," I told myself. "Let's do this." I changed into a smart work outfit, a white blouse, black pants, my hair tied in a sleek bun. Not a wedding dress, not a bridal outfit, but the attire of someone about to handle the most important business of her life. I brewed a cup of black coffee. Its bitter taste spread on my tongue but was strangely comforting. In my head, the steps to take began to appear with sharp clarity. Step 1. Announce the cancellation of the wedding. Step 2. Block contacts to avoid emotional manipulation. Step 3. Seek legal help to protect my assets and reputation. Clear, concise, no beating around the bush. The phone vibrated. A message from Chloe. "Alara, remember to get to bed early. The bride has to be the most beautiful." I looked at the text and laughed, a laugh that was no longer bitter at its core. Don't worry, I thought. Tomorrow, I'll be incredibly sharp. I didn't reply. I put the phone down, then opened my messaging app and searched for Caleb's name. His profile picture was still our happy photo together from our vacation in Lake Geneva last year. I looked at it for a few seconds, then typed, word by word, "Caleb, the wedding is off. We are not getting married." No extra explanations, no complaints, no exclamation points. I pressed send. The message status changed to delivered. My heart beat faster for a split second, then slowed. A strange relief washed over me, as if I had just dropped a massive boulder from my shoulders. Immediately, my phone began to vibrate nonstop. A call from Caleb, then from Brenda, then from Chloe. I looked at the screen calmly, then turned off the phone. Not because I was scared, but because I knew that at this moment, whatever they said would be futile. They didn't need the truth. They only needed profit. I sat in my chair, watching the sunbeams enter the room. A new day had begun. Not a wedding day, but the day I decided to take back my life. Dear listeners, if you have followed my story to this point, perhaps many of you feel a tightness in your chest, anger, and sympathy. But believe me, after such sleepless nights, a brighter path always awaits. I took a deep breath, turned my phone back on, and searched for Aunt Helen's number. Aunt Helen, I said when the call was answered on the other end. My voice was hoarse but firm. Alara needs your help with a very urgent matter. There was silence for a few seconds on the other end. Then Aunt Helen's voice became serious. Tell me, Alara, what happened? I looked out the window, where the sun's rays were already bathing the roofs of the old houses. I'm not getting married, I said, and I need to protect everything my mother left me. Attorney Helen arrived at my rented apartment as the morning was in full swing. She wore a gray blazer, her hair in a bun, her face serious, but her eyes were incredibly warm. As soon as she entered, she looked around the room. Her gaze paused on the wedding dress hanging on the rack, then shifted to me. Are you okay? I nodded and smiled slightly. My smile was no longer trembling like last night, but strangely calm. I'm okay, Aunt Helen. I've never been more clear-headed. Helen didn't press for details. She put down her purse, sat across from me, and took out a small notepad and a pen. Tell me everything from the beginning. Every detail. Don't leave anything out, I told her. I told her everything from the moment I went back for the cardigan, about every word I heard from behind the door, to the 3-minute recording saved on my phone. When I played the recording for Aunt Helen in that small room, time seemed to freeze. Aunt Helen listened with intense focus, not interrupting. When the recording finished, she sighed deeply. You were very lucky, she said slowly. Extremely lucky that you heard this, and even luckier that you managed to record it. I smiled. A mixture of bitterness and amusement surfaced in my heart. I never thought I'd have to do something like this one day. That's life, Helen replied. Some lessons come at a very high price, but if you don't learn them, the price will be even higher. She opened her briefcase and took out a file of white papers. Now, listen to me. First, you cannot give in at all. This family will try everything. They will call, show up in person, cry, blame you, and even threaten you. Their only goal is to make you waver. I nodded. Second, all the property deeds in your name. Never, under any circumstances, hand over the original documents. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. Third, she looked me straight in the eye. If you have to talk to them, only do it with a lawyer present. Aunt Helen's words weren't meant to comfort. They were a lifeline thrown at the perfect moment. My phone rang, as if to prove her point. Caleb's number was on the screen. I looked at it for a moment, then pressed the green button. Alara, where are you? Caleb's voice was no longer gentle. It was rushed and irritated. Do you have any idea what you're doing? I turned on the speakerphone and placed the phone on the table. I'm at home. What home? By what right do you call off the wedding without talking to me about it? I glanced at Aunt Helen. She gave a slight nod. Caleb, I said in a flat voice, I sent you a very clear message. The wedding is off. We are not getting married. For what reason? Caleb raised his voice. Tell me, you can't just do something so absurd. Absurd? I laughed. Do you really want to know the reason? Yes, I want to hear it. I didn't answer right away. I picked up my phone and played the audio recording. Brenda's voice, Chloe's voice. Every word resounded clearly in the room. On the other end, a dead silence suddenly fell. Only Caleb's ragged breathing could be heard. When the recording ended, I finally spoke again. Do you still want to hear the reason? A long silence. Finally, Caleb spoke, his voice no longer so confident. Alara, about that. Let me explain. My mother was just talking. She wasn't serious. Oh, really? I asked. And what about the condo? What about my mother's money? What about the plan to get me drunk at the wedding? Alara, listen to me. I've heard everything I needed to hear. Caleb started to lose his patience. Don't overreact, Alara. The wedding is fully arranged. The guests, the venue, the family. If you call it off, you'll bring shame on both our families. I smiled bitterly. And did you ever think that I would lose my entire life? Caleb fell silent. At that moment, another voice cut in. Brenda's voice. Alara, dear, don't listen to that recording and jump to conclusions. I was just saying those things out of concern for your future, yours and Caleb's. I looked out the window. The sun's rays seemed blinding. Brenda, I said slowly, you don't have to act anymore. I heard everything. What way is that to talk? I treated you like my own daughter. If you treated me like a daughter, you wouldn't have planned to sell my condo behind my back. Brenda was silent for a moment, then her voice rose. How dare you speak to me like that, you little brat? I took a deep breath. I'm just speaking based on the facts. At that moment, Aunt Helen interjected, her voice calm but incredibly firm. Good morning, Brenda. My name is Helen, and as of today, I am Alara's legal counsel. Complete silence on the other end. Attorney Helen continued. All communication will now go directly through me. Any threats, defamation, or attempts to fraudulently acquire assets will be recorded and reported to law enforcement in accordance with the law. After a long moment, Caleb spoke, his tone much lower. Alara, do you really want to make this so complicated? I looked straight at the phone. I'm not the one who complicated it. I just stopped it at the right time. I hung up. The room was quiet again, but it wasn't the oppressive silence of the night before. It was the relief that follows a powerful storm. Aunt Helen looked at me, a hint of pride in her eyes. You handled that well. I sank into the chair, letting out a long breath. Aunt Helen, I said, I'm not as sad as I thought I would be, because I woke up in time. I glanced at the wedding dress. For the first time, I felt no regret. I'd like to ask you for one more thing, I said. The money Caleb's family borrowed from me over the years. I want to collect that debt. Aunt Helen nodded. Prepare all the transaction records. I'll handle the rest. I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened the drawer. The transfer receipts appeared before my eyes, one by one. Each number was a reminder of the past. Thank goodness I kept all of this, I mumbled. Attorney Helen smiled. It's not a matter of luck. It's the result of how prudently you manage your affairs. Outside, Chicago was already entering its busy morning. People were still going to weddings, offering congratulations, believing in beautiful pictures. Meanwhile, in this small room, I was step by step dismantling the trap that had been set for me for 5 years, and I knew this storm wasn't over yet, but at least I was now standing on the right side. After that morning's phone call, my rented room immediately transformed into a strategic headquarters. Aunt Helen pulled a chair up to the desk, opened her laptop, and arranged documents into neat piles. I made another coffee, placed it in front of her, and then sat down opposite her. There were no pleasantries. We worked like two people, solving a complex mathematical equation, where the stake was the peace of my future life. Give me all the transaction records, the lawyer said emphatically. The clearer the better, I nodded, opening the folder I had prepared during the night. 17 transfers, each for a different reason. Sometimes it was a sudden family emergency. Sometimes Chloe needed to pay tuition. Sometimes it was for home repairs, a temporary investment, or just a loan to patch a hole. The amounts varied from $500 to even $7,500, totaling over $10,000. Helen read through them slowly, as if reading an indictment. First, she said, a transfer to Brenda's account. Memo. Temporary loan. Second, same account. Third, a transfer to Caleb's sister, Chloe. I smiled bitterly. I thought very simply back then. They're family, and they have problems, so I'll help. Aunt Helen looked up at me. You didn't make a mistake by helping. You made a mistake by helping people who didn't deserve it too many times. Her words made me laugh. A very light laugh, no longer bitter. Maybe because someone had finally said aloud what I felt in my heart, and justly so. My phone vibrated nonstop. Messages poured in one after another. From Caleb, Alara, please, just listen to my explanation. From Chloe, we can talk about this normally. Why are you making such a scene? An unknown number also called. I looked at it and didn't answer. Attorney Helen glanced at my phone screen, then waved her hand. Don't answer. They're testing your reaction. I silenced the ringer and placed the phone face down. At that moment, I found the whole situation rather amusing. On this day, I was supposed to be at the makeup artist's, wearing a wedding dress, and smiling at guests. Instead, I was counting every dollar I had ever lent out to demand justice. Truly, no one can write the script for our lives. By early afternoon, Helen had finished drafting the demand letter. The sentences were clear, specific, without excessive emotion. I read it over, feeling as if I were reading someone else's story. "Sign it," she said. I took the pen and signed my name with confidence. The trembling signature from the past was gone. Done. Helen closed the file. "I'll send this letter this afternoon. If they're smart, they'll negotiate. If not, we have sufficient legal grounds." I breathed a sigh of relief. "Aunt Helen, I feel so much lighter because I've finally stopped lying to myself." Late in the afternoon, after the lawyer had left, I finally had time to sit in solitude. The sun's rays streamed into the room, illuminating the white wedding dress that still hung in the corner. I looked at it, walked closer, and gently stroked its fabric. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "It turns out you weren't meant for me." I took the dress off the hanger, folded it carefully, and placed it in its box. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but I was sure of one thing. I would not wear it to step into a false life. The phone rang again. This time, Caleb was calling from his work number. I looked at it for a moment, then answered. "Alara." His voice was hoarse. "Do you really want to take it this far?" I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm. "I just want to get back what's mine. That money will be returned to you. But please, don't use a lawyer anymore. We can talk, just the two of us." I laughed. "Caleb, I've talked with you enough over the last 5 years. Just think it over. We were together for 5 years. It's impossible that you're throwing it all away over a few stupid words." "It's not because of a few words," I replied, "but because of the way you all looked at me." Silence on the other end. "I'll talk to my mother," he said quietly. "Talk to whoever you want," I replied. "But from now on, please handle all matters concerning money and my good name through my legal counsel." I hung up. This time there was no trembling, no regret, no hesitation. That evening, I cooked a simple pasta for myself and ate while listening to gentle music. For the first time in days, my head wasn't filled with chaos. I suddenly thought that if this event hadn't happened, I might have spent the rest of my life as a patient wife, serving as a backup resource bank for my husband's entire family. The thought made me shudder, and then I laughed again. "I dodged a bullet," I said to myself. Dear listeners, if you are listening to me up to this point, if you feel sympathy for me or a sense of relief that I no longer have to suffer in silence, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to continue accompanying me. Your every bit of support is a reminder that a woman who stands up to defend herself is never alone. Night fell. I opened the window to let in some cool air. For the first time in a long time, I slept very deeply, not dreaming of a wedding, not dreaming of a slightly ajar door. There would surely be more storms tomorrow, but I was ready for them. The next morning, I woke up when my alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., the exact time I usually got up for work. For a moment, my head was slightly confused. For a split second, I still thought that today I should be in a wedding dress, sitting in front of a mirror, listening to the loud hum of a hairdryer and smelling the scent of face powder. But that lasted only a second. I remembered everything, and the first feeling that emerged was not regret, but immense relief. I stretched and opened the window. The sky over Chicago was clear that morning, a rare occurrence. The sun's rays illuminated the rooftops across the street, bringing warmth and peace. An ordinary day, and it was this very ordinariness that made me feel safe. I got ready for work as usual. White blouse, black pants, flat shoes. No one at the office knew that this was supposed to have been my wedding day, and I didn't want anyone to find out. It was my private life, and I preferred to keep it that way. Just as I left my apartment, my phone vibrated. This time it wasn't Caleb, but an unknown number. I stared at it for a few seconds, then decided to answer. "Hello, am I speaking with Miss Alara?" A middle-aged man's voice, somewhat stern. "This is she." "Who's calling?" "I'm Caleb's uncle. Tell me, what on earth happened between you two? The whole family is in shock over your behavior." I stopped at the top of the stairs, leaning on the railing. "Which version of the story would you like to hear, uncle?" "The true version, child. A wedding is no small matter. If there's a problem, you need to talk it out." "Why are you making such a circus out of it?" I smiled. "You're right. Big matters need to be laid out clearly. The truth is, I'm not getting married, and I have very strong reasons for it." What powerful reasons could those be? I had no intention of explaining myself to him. "If you want to know the reasons, I invite you to contact my lawyer. She has all the evidence." There was a short silence on the other end, and then his voice became gentler. "Alara, You and Caleb were together for a long time, after all. Your uncle just hopes you'll reconsider. I have reconsidered very carefully, I said. I will not change my decision. I hung up. As I walked out of the gate, the wind blew coolly. There were no more storms in my heart. I knew there would be more calls like this, but they were like small waves. They no longer had the power to knock me over. At the office, everything was normal. Colleagues greeted me, asked about projects, we discussed tasks. No one mentioned a wedding, maybe because I was generally a rather private person, or maybe because everyone was busy with their own lives. And I suddenly realized that the world doesn't stop turning because of a canceled wedding. It was only the center of the universe in my own mind. At lunchtime, as I was eating my meal, my phone vibrated again. This time it was Brenda. I looked at the name on the screen, sighed, and answered. Alara. Her voice sounded completely different from the day before. It was so gentle it seemed strange. Where are you, dear? I'm at work. What is it? Can I come and see you? Let's just talk, the two of us. I laughed lightly. I don't think we have anything left to say to each other. You're angry with me, aren't you? I'm old now and sometimes I say foolish things. Please forgive me. I looked out the office window, where the sun was shining directly on my desk. I'm not angry. I just don't trust you anymore. What are you talking about? I mean that from now on, please discuss all matters with my legal counsel. I don't want to hear any more explanations. On the other end, her voice suddenly changed, losing all its gentleness. Alara, don't you think that just because you have a little money, you can push people around? Our family has its honor too. I laughed bitterly. Honor isn't in what you say. It's in what you do. I hung up and blocked her number. My hand trembled slightly, but my heart felt incredibly light, as if I had just locked a door that should have been closed long ago. Late in the afternoon, Aunt Helen sent me a message. They've received the demand letter. They want to negotiate. I read the message and bit my lip. I replied, Aunt Helen, please handle it. I don't want to meet with them. Helen replied quickly. Don't worry. Focus on your life. I put my phone away and went back to work. My mind was no longer filled with images of Caleb's family. In their place were plans for upcoming projects, deadlines, very mundane matters. And it was this very mundanity that made me feel like I was back on track. After work, I stopped by the supermarket downstairs from my building to buy a few things for dinner. Standing in the checkout line, I realized I was quietly whistling. It was a habit I hadn't had in a very long time. Back in my apartment, I prepared a simple meal and ate while watching the news. Life went on. It didn't end, just because one wedding didn't happen. Before bed, I opened my closet. I took out another cardigan. One my mom had knitted for me, and that I had carefully stored away. I put it on and stood in front of the mirror. It was a soft cream color. The cut was simple, the stitches a bit uneven, but it was incredibly warm. Mom, I said quietly, Alara is doing okay. The woman looking back at me in the mirror had no exhaustion or fear on her face. There was only the peace of someone who had survived a storm and knew what she wanted. I turned off the light, got into bed, and silenced my phone. No calls could pull me back into the past anymore. That door was closed, and the key was in my hands. 3 days after the wedding was called off, what I had expected arrived. Not in the form of a direct confrontation, but as whispers and rumors that crept through phone calls, stolen glances, and questions asked as if by chance, yet sharp as needles. That morning, I had barely sat down at my desk when a colleague from the next cubicle approached, her voice a mixture of curiosity and timidity. Alara, I heard you had some trouble last weekend. I looked up, smiling with stoic calm. Oh, I called off my wedding. My colleague's eyes widened. Seriously? Why so suddenly? We weren't compatible. That's all, I replied. She was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. Well, that's true. Marriage is a lifelong decision after all. She went back to her desk, but I knew the story wouldn't end there. At lunchtime, my phone vibrated. A message from an old acquaintance who had attended a few of Caleb's family gatherings. Alara, I heard you called off the wedding because Caleb isn't wealthy enough, is that right? I read the message and laughed out loud. It wasn't a laugh of joy, but one born of habit, of being accustomed to how easily blame is shifted. I replied with a single sentence. That's not the story at all. Then I put the phone down, offering no further explanation and not engaging in a debate. That evening, attorney Helen called. They've started a smear campaign against you, the lawyer said directly. They're spreading stories that you looked down on Caleb because of his lower income and that you had exorbitant demands. I was standing by the window, watching the river of people heading home from work on the street below. I know, Aunt Helen. Do you want me to issue a statement? I shook my head, though I knew Helen couldn't see it. Not yet. I have no intention of explaining myself or arguing. Are you sure you've thought this through? Yes. Those who trust me don't need an explanation. And for those who don't, there's no point in explaining anything. Helen sighed heavily. You're just like your mother. I smiled. Mom had once said the same thing when she was mistaken for someone she wasn't. The following days were marked by rumors that spread faster than anyone could have imagined. Some people asked indirectly, while others simply remained silent, looking at me with a certain distance. I chose the only sensible way to face it, to live normally. I came to work on time, focused on my tasks, held meetings, wrote reports, and planned new projects, as if the cancellation of my wedding had never happened. In the evenings, I cooked, read books, and did light exercise. My life didn't derail just because of rumors. Sometimes, when I was alone, I wondered if I should publish some kind of explanation, and then I would remember Brenda's greedy eyes behind the door, Chloe's laugh as she planned to take over the River North condo, and that cold, soulless 3-minute recording. I knew my silence was not a result of weakness, but of my own dignity. One evening, I received a call. The number was unknown, but I immediately recognized the voice when I heard the words, "Alara, it's Caleb." He sounded terribly tired. "I just want to ask you one thing. Just tell me, did you ever love me at all?" I leaned back in my chair, looking at the yellow glow of the lamp reflected on the wall. "I loved you," I said, incredibly calm. "Then why were you so heartless?" "I wasn't heartless," I interrupted him, "but I can't love blindly." Silence on the other end. "Alara," he said quietly, "I'm only now realizing it was my mistake." I let out a loud breath. "Caleb, whether it was a mistake or not, it really doesn't matter anymore. Can't you give me one more chance?" I shook my head. "There are some doors that, once closed, will only bring more pain if you try to open them again." He said nothing more. The call ended in complete silence. That night, I wasn't sad, nor did I feel victorious. I only felt a gentle emptiness in my heart, which, however, quickly began to fill with a new inner peace. A few days later, Attorney Helen brought news. They've agreed to repay the borrowed money, in 3 installments, she announced. Each will be several $1,000s. The first installment will arrive next week. I nodded at the phone. "Thank you so much, Aunt Helen. Do you want to meet them to sign the settlement agreement?" "No," I replied instantly. "You represent me." "All right." After the call, I stood by the window for a long time. Outside, the city was beginning to sparkle with its evening lights. Everything continued to function, regardless of people's personal tragedies. And in that moment, I unexpectedly realized one thing. From the time I called off the wedding until now, I hadn't cried once over losing Caleb. I had only cried for the former version of myself, who had made such a huge mistake in her trust. And once that version was gone, my tears finally dried up. If someone were to ask me if the gossip was painful, I would say yes. But that pain was in no way great enough to pull me back to a place where I never belonged. I opened the closet and took out the box with the wedding dress. I didn't open it. I wasn't in a hurry yet. Everything takes time, even letting go. I sat on the bed, opened a notebook, and wrote one simple sentence. Silence doesn't mean you are weak. It just means you are strong enough not to have to prove anything to anyone anymore. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. Outside, the hum of cars, the sounds of life, continued. In my small room, I was learning how to stand firmly on my own 2 feet, completely ignoring what was said about me. That week passed very slowly, as if the city itself had deliberately slowed down to let me catch my breath. Mornings to work, evenings back home. Walking the familiar path, I started to notice something unusual in myself. The anxiety no longer choked me. Instead, a deep, quiet space had appeared. A non-threatening space, like a room just cleaned of years of accumulated clutter. On Friday afternoon, just as I was finishing a report, my phone vibrated. A notification from my banking app flashed on the screen for a split second, carrying a simple message that made me freeze. Deposit of $3,300 has been credited. I stared at the words. I didn't jump for joy, didn't let out a huge sigh of relief, and didn't feel the immense happiness I thought I would. All I felt was solid ground under my feet, as if a brick had returned to its proper place. A moment later, Attorney Helen called. The first installment is in your account. They didn't dare to delay. Yes, Aunt Helen, I replied. Thank you very much. How do you feel? I thought for a moment. Normal. Aunt Helen chuckled quietly. Good. Normal means you're no longer letting them or their money suffocate you. After she hung up, I leaned back in my office chair and looked out the window. The sky had taken on an autumn hue. Low-hanging clouds hid a pale sun. At that moment, a colleague happened to walk by. He noticed me staring out the window. He smiled and said, Alara, you look exceptionally relaxed today. I am, I replied, returning the smile. I just managed to settle some old debts. Must have been important matters. I was just learning to let go, I said with a half smile. He didn't press the subject, just nodded and went to his desk. There are some things in life that, if you explain them, people wouldn't understand anyway. It's better to keep them to yourself. That evening, I got back to Wicker Park earlier than usual. When I opened the door to my small apartment, I was immediately greeted by the scent of wood, the smell of laundry from the drying rack, and simply the atmosphere of the life I was building here. I turned on a lamp, sat at my desk, and opened my banking app. I glanced at the account balance, not to check it, but to confirm to myself that life was returning to stability. I remembered the times in the past when I had transferred money to Caleb. Sometimes over dinner, sometimes in the middle of a team meeting, sometimes even in the middle of the night after reading a message that his family was in sudden debt. I ended each of those moments by telling myself, for my own peace of mind, well, I have to help. When you help loved ones, it's noble, but deep inside, a suppressed anxiety was hiding. I had consciously ignored it back then. Today, I no longer had to. From the closet, I pulled out the white box, tossed it onto the bed, and sat on the edge. I looked at the cardboard box for a long time, then hesitantly lifted the lid. You know, I said softly, as if to a friend, sometimes there are things of captivating beauty. It's just a shame they're not meant for us to keep. I lifted the flaps of the box. The snow-white dress was impeccably arranged, flawless, perfectly straight. Not a single trace of the once-desired wedding day. I gently ran my hand over the soft tulle. It was cool to the touch. The pain no longer rang inside me. The regret had evaporated. All that remained was a bittersweet nostalgia for memories so distant. I closed the flaps of the box, hiding its contents again. What I would ultimately do with it, I didn't know yet. But I was 100% sure that when the decision was finally made, I wouldn't feel even the slightest flicker of doubt. Then my smartphone vibrated in my hand. Chloe, Caleb's sister, Alara, here is the confirmation for the first installment. Forgive us for that incident a few weeks ago. Reading her text, I didn't react. I took a moment of silence and then slowly typed out, word by word. Paying back what you owe is not a favor. It is your obligation. Click. I sent it. Immediately I used the block contact feature. I didn't write another word, and finally closed the gate on the prospect of another pointless discussion. Over the entire weekend that followed, I embarked on a total cleanup. The desire to clean the dirt from the floor became secondary. The goal of this moral renovation was to banish the old filth of the past to the dark abyss of oblivion, the same filth I had intended to pack into boxes for the move to my dream home with the man of my life. Everything I touched and threw into the plastic garbage bag lifted a few powerful grams of weight from the past years. In the early afternoon, I started sorting textbooks on an old shelf and spotted a photograph tucked between the cracks. The photo showed us smiling from ear to ear during our first romantic trip with Caleb to Lake Geneva. Our hair was tousled and messy from the stormy wind. Looking at us both in that slice of time, I didn't scream with fury. I felt an overwhelming sense of pity, a pity for both of us, so naively convinced of the flawless futures that awaited us in adulthood. I put that one memory in a thin envelope and tucked it into the corner of the bottom shelf drawer, without any urge to destroy the paper. Erasing and liquidating relics of existence was unnecessary. All that was needed was to cut them off. As evening sounds filled the air, I settled my body with a cup of herbal tea on the tiny attached balcony of my Wicker Park apartment. The shouts of playing children, the roar of car engines, the bells of cyclists on the road reached me from below. It was all very raw, real to the core. I had a gigantic feeling of resurrection, of an existence free from what could have been and what is an obligation. My mind drifted back to my late mother's words about the necessity of financial self-control and moral self-governance. As a naive youth, I hadn't been able to grasp the weight of those warnings. Now I understood. Mom, forgive me. Your daughter will never make you cry with worry again. A warmth spread from my chest up my neck. Not the fire of euphoria, ecstasy, or whimsy. It was a solid stream of steady heat. Darkness completely enveloped the sky. I lay straight on the foam mattress of my bed. I opened the browser notifications for worldwide news and instantly turned off the screen. The urge to check for intrusive calls from people with a noose around their necks, demanding emotional and monetary subsidies, was gone forever. My world had derailed from the circle of false faces and false names. A moment before closing my eyes, I grabbed the hard cover of a notebook with a few concepts scribbled on its pages and added a modest summary. My financial assets have returned to their rightful owner. More importantly, my heart no longer wanders like a homeless mutt on a butcher's leash, aimlessly and without its own will. I turned off the light. The yellow glow of the ceiling lamp above me vanished, leaving a zone of darkness like a protective cocoon around my listless body and the bedding, which in the morning would form the solid posture of a character slowly building in confidence and a harder shell for life's battles. A month after I walked away from the firing squad of a sham marriage, I came to understand that the wound in my chest wouldn't be healed by medicine, but by the rigorous principle of no illusions. I woke up in the morning, went downstairs to air out the street's exhaust fumes, greeting the morning with a hot, scalding cup of black espresso from a machine, and looked through the thin, web-like windows of a small cafe in front of my rented apartment building. The city hummed on my right, a natural drumbeat of life, reminding me of my own existence in the capital. The vibrating smartphone buzzed for a moment. Aunt Helen, we have the second installment. I quickly typed a confirmation on the virtual keyboard. I sent a message devoid of expressive emojis, with a forced smile, resisting the urge to be overly expansive. The matter of the money was settled in its proper place. Money is a material frame, not an iron rope around my neck for my conscience. Gathering my things for work, I glanced at the dark corner of the room, between the top of the closet and the bedding, and my eyes fell on that stunning, sterilely crafted dress, the product of tailoring that cost several $1,000s. It lay unpacked next to the bed with a cluster of silent questions about its final verdict, as if it had been waiting for over a month for judgment, with no appeal for the executioner. Stopped just short of my own shoes, I hurried out, slamming the door. There were today's priorities with office plans of great importance. That afternoon, a notification came to the office's landline about a charity seeking donations for the underprivileged, looking for dresses for needy brides. The gentle tone on the helpline was non-invasive, without the dictatorial persuasion of a pushy request. Click. I hung up, my gaze frozen out the window, finding a silent agreement in my heart for the execution of this element within me. The long-awaited final decision had arrived. I took the large package in my arms, gently lifting the lid of the sturdy, matte-coated cardboard. Beneath it, the snow-white dress lay, barely breathing. The phenomenal whiteness of the veil, without the slightest flaw, crease, or fold in the fabric from the weaver's factory. But I lost that sharp intake of breath upon meeting the smooth texture of the fabric, like a blow to the heart with a pang of regret for the lost opportunity of a different time, of me in that wedding attire. Dreams. I placed the entire thing inside a large cloth bag, armed on my shoulder with a letter tucked into a fold of the hem, with aesthetically written prose. This is a new wedding dress. I never wore it. I hope it brings another bride happiness. I didn't sign my name, delivering it anonymously to the hands of a volunteer at the foundation's doorstep. She looked at me with a mixture of astonishment at the pristine condition of the dress and a desire to ask about the reason for its abandonment. Wow, it's beautiful. Are you sure you want to donate it? It must have cost a fortune. It did, I replied, my cheeks drawn in, my lips stretching into a wider smile. I lost the purpose for this garment in my tomorrow. It didn't provoke a sting in my chest. I thought for a moment, shaking my head slightly to lose the thought in a flirtation of words. No, because inside my portfolio of behaviors and experiences, I've packed a more solid supply of values. She nodded, moved, a moist glint in the corner of her eyes shining with admiration and dignity at my words. As I stood under the open sky of the city, illuminated by the trails of car lights, I left the office building, quenching a monstrous, senseless hunger for loneliness and fear, only to receive a sudden, incomprehensible lightness of being for the confessions I'd made in my dreams, for a script that never became my reality, the one written by Caleb's mother. Returning to my evening routine, I received a notification on my messenger from a close friend. Seriously, you just tossed your thousands of dollars of smooth silk and noble tulle into a drawer for strangers to try on out of pity, just to erase the past? Wow, you've got guts, girl. I'm so proud of you. Seriously, you're amazing. A smile crept up again as I typed under the glow of the screen. To help me discard the heavy arsenal from the attics of my mind and the burden of wearing a pointless yoke, she sent a series of laughing emojis, inviting me to breathe the fresh air by Lake Michigan for a weekend of mental recuperation. Okay, that plan works for me, I typed, agreeing to the invitation. Looking into the dark window, the silhouette of a figure from a few cold past years appeared in my mind, losing the distinct shapes of the monstrous feelings of obligation, fear of loss, and the severance of a stable future that had once dominated my heart. It wasn't that I felt superior or a stronger version of myself. The only thing that pushed me to confront the lies was my final, inescapable mistake, awakening a dormant strength and instinct to return and fight for my own destiny, to uphold the truth, and to not remain trapped by mistakes that would consume all my future days under the thumb of strangers, without rights or respect. My phone vibrated on the desk again. Aunt Helen. The third installment transfer will be processed at the start of next week's schedule, she said into the phone. Good. Everything is settled then. All legal matters definitively closed to avoid any further issues. Of course, Alara, Aunt Helen said with a smile. In return, I demand total radio silence from the gossip of your former fiancé's family. You are now fully legally protected. They have no access to you. The call ended. Closing my eyes as the light in the ceiling went out, the darkness enveloped me like a whisper from the slightly ajar door, before I drifted off into a silent, peaceful sleep. If you, dear listeners, have followed my story until now, if you have ever felt anger, compassion, and relief when I decided not to go through with that wrong wedding, please click the subscribe button on this channel to continue accompanying me. Your love and support are a great source of strength for me and many other women, reminding us that choosing yourself is never a mistake. The next morning, I put on the cardigan my mom had knitted and went out into the street. The sweater wasn't new. The stitches weren't perfect, but it was warm. Mom once said, "You just have to live well. God won't stand by idly." I believed that. I didn't become a bride. There was no wedding, no white dress walking down the aisle. But I crossed another threshold in my life. The one where I stopped giving the right to decide my happiness to anyone else. And when I think about it, I feel a great gratitude. Gratitude for that dark night before the wedding day. Gratitude for the ajar door. Gratitude for those cold, merciless 3 minutes of recording. Because if it weren't for all that, I might have had to pay with the rest of my life. After the wedding dress was well and truly gone from my apartment, life didn't become empty as many might have imagined. On the contrary, it was filled to the brim with things that had a concrete, defined purpose. It was probably when the constant distraction of the engagement ended that I began to see the straight road ahead of me clearly. On Monday morning, I walked into the main conference room holding a thick stack of documents. The project that had consumed my team for nearly 3 months was due for its final year-end summary at the corporate headquarters in downtown Chicago. In the days leading up to the pre-wedding frenzy, I had planned to delegate the presentation to a colleague, as a favor to a friend on the verge of tying the sacred knot to help the head of our future household get a promotion. Looking back now, I had only a slight, mocking smile on my lips for the bottomless lack of faith I once had in my fears of losing love. The CEO looked at the management team gathered around the conference table. Alara, the audit presentation to the board of directors is yours to lead. That's correct, sir, I said in a firm tone, meeting my boss's gaze without a yawn or a flicker of stress, ready to navigate the spreadsheets for the audience on the screen. The presentation was smooth, without a single stumble, without a doubt in my arguments under the barrage of sharp questions from the board and directors. My direct supervisor nodded in approval, giving my shoulder a discreet pat. Brilliant work, Alara, my department director said with a handshake as we left the intense debate for a coffee break. I just did my job, I replied, but I felt a surge of pride. It wasn't just about keeping my job, it was about reclaiming my professional identity. When we sat down with the team for lunch, an older, senior manager turned to me directly. Alara, the grapevine says your personal life has hit some rough patches. Without emotion, I continued eating my cold meal, then looked at her with a gentle smile. Don't worry, I got a lesson in applying the brakes just before a major derailment. I managed to save my assets at just the right time. She lowered her gaze, her face serious, confirming a silent thought. Hitting the brakes to save yourself from suffocating fears requires nerves of steel and a powerful dose of courage. I tasted a bit of understanding from strangers who, despite their ignorance and judgment, give unspoken respect to those who stand tall in the eye of a storm. That evening, Aunt Helen messaged me. Final installment confirmed. The case is officially closed. You are free. I read it. No racing heart, no huge enthusiasm, just a feeling of lightness. Good, Aunt Helen. That evening, I called someone I hadn't been in active contact with for a long time. Mrs. Gable, my mother's former neighbor. Hello, Mrs. Gable. Oh, Alara, it's good to hear from you. It's been a while. How are you, dear? I'm well, Mrs. Gable. I just wanted to ask something. I know Mom sometimes left things with you. Is there anything of hers still there? Mrs. Gable was silent for a few seconds, then replied, There is, dear. There's one canvas bag. I've kept it safe. I nodded slowly, a lump forming in my throat. I understand. I'll come by to pick it up. Over the weekend, I returned to the old neighborhood where my mother once lived. The little street was still the same, only the old corner store had a new owner. Mrs. Gable handed me a light blue cloth bag. Inside were a few old photos, a notebook, and a thin envelope. I opened the notebook, my mother's familiar slanted handwriting. Alara, my daughter, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer by your side. Don't be sad. I only want you to live your life well, for yourself. I stood motionless for a long time. These words didn't command sacrifice, patience, or self-denial. They taught me only one thing: live well for yourself. On the way back, I stopped by my condo in River North, the condo that had never been touched by the shoe of anyone from my ex-fiancé's family. There was only the smell of fresh paint, the sun streaming through the windows, and a deep silence. I opened the door, stood in the middle of the spacious living room, and suddenly burst out laughing. At least you didn't lose the roof over your head, I said to myself. That evening, I called my friend Jenna. Next weekend, I'm moving into my place in River North, I said decisively. Are you feeling okay? Better than I thought. Okay, I'll come help with the boxes. Great. That night, I slept on a mattress on the floor of my new living room. I didn't have a bed or furniture yet, but the warmth from the underfloor heating and the knowledge that I was in my own home made me fall asleep in an instant, with a deep sense of peace and relief. The next morning, I was awakened by a notification from my banking app. The final debt installment from Caleb's family had been deposited. I put the phone down, feeling only indifference. I no longer had any desire to analyze the past or think about my ex-fiancé's toxic family, who saw me as nothing more than a free ATM. I was finally free. There were no what-ifs. There was only one certainty. I had chosen well. I made coffee, stepped out onto the terrace, and admired the waking city and my own life, free from obligations, deceitful gratitude, and the false embrace of a family that was never mine. About 2 weeks after moving into my River North condo, I began to get used to the new, larger space. The morning sun would skim across the large glass of the terrace windows, casting shadows on the hardwood floor, and breathing a sense of blissful rest into this new space, a space defined by my own solitude, a new formula to be replicated each day. The simple act of breathing clean air lightened my chest, free from the burden of reporting to anyone, but of being constantly monitored for every move I made. For the first few nights, I felt a dissonance that made it hard to fall asleep. However, it stemmed from reacquainting myself with a space meant exclusively for my own existence, free from the dictates of a higher sphere next to me. Once I overcame the accommodation process, my breath, as my head hit the pillow, signaled the end of the day's anxieties, extinguishing the tremors of thought about deceitful matrimonial phantoms and doorstep stalkers. At work, the chase for reports fell into the daily hustle, no longer revolving around the imaginary novel of a jilted woman. A new project refreshed my focus. At the same time, I walked into the director's office with a proposal. Alara, the general director began, his gaze observant. The board has discussed it and sees you as the mind and soul for a promotion. It will absorb a lot of your energy, but it brings the chance for a higher level of career prestige, with travel and benefits. Will you take the helm of this ship? I will, I said, my voice steady. The director gave a short nod, a shadow of a smile on his face, confident in my ready acceptance of the challenge. My heart pounded with excitement for the career battle ahead. If I were the old me, I'd be worrying about what Caleb and Brenda would think. Would they resent me, call me a selfish careerist? Now, that didn't even have a right to exist. That weekend, Jenna came over to help me assemble furniture. Sitting on the floor with a screwdriver in hand, she looked at me and said, "You know what, Alara? You look a world better, like you've dropped a ton from your shoulders." Because I have, I replied with a laugh. My whole life I thought I had to fit in with someone and earn their love. Now I've realized it's enough to live in harmony with myself. On Sunday afternoon, I went to the cemetery. I placed a bouquet of white chrysanthemums on my mother's grave. The cool wind gently moved the tree branches. "I'm doing okay, Mom," I whispered. "I understood your lesson. I will never again let anyone use me. I won't sacrifice my life for people who, under the guise of family, only see money in me." The rustle of the wind seemed like her quiet approval. One Friday evening at the beginning of winter, I stopped by my favorite coffee shop on the ground floor of my office building to work on a few slides. A normal day, jazz music in the background, until I heard a familiar voice. Alara. I looked up. Caleb was standing by my table, thinner than before, in a dark jacket. His eyes held a mixture of surprise and hesitation. Instead of embarrassment, I felt only complete indifference. "Hi," I said with a polite nod. He paused, then pulled out a chair and sat opposite me, keeping his distance. "I didn't think I'd see you here." "I work nearby," I replied. "I come in here sometimes." The atmosphere wasn't tense, nor was it familiar. It was like two people who once knew each other and were now strangers with a shared past. "You look different," he said. "Calmer, lighter." I smiled. "Maybe because I'm not forcing myself to do anything anymore." He looked down, turning the cup in front of him. "I've thought a lot about everything that happened. I'm sorry I didn't protect you, that I let it happen." I looked at him for a long time. Not to consider forgiveness, but to be sure of one important thing. "Do these words still affect me?" "Caleb," I said slowly, "it is your right to apologize, but whether I have to listen to it or not is my right." He looked at me, slightly confused. "I don't expect you to come back." "I just wanted to say that." "I understand," I said with a nod. "I heard you." As I left the coffee shop, he didn't stop me. The cold wind hit the back of my neck. I pulled up my collar and walked slowly down the sidewalk. I felt that a certain chapter had closed for good. After calling off the wedding, I didn't make a habit of asking why it happened to me. Instead, I asked myself what I would do with myself now. Subsequent business trips, like a training seminar in Denver, opened my eyes. Women of all ages divorced, single, married. None of them defined their worth by a ring on their finger. Every month I started reserving one day exclusively for myself. No phone, no work, no friends, just me, a good book, and cooking. That same evening, Jenna, sitting on my floor, asked, "Do you ever regret it?" "Regret what? Calling off the wedding?" "No. If I regret anything, it's that I ever doubted my own worth," I said. "I used to be afraid of losing a person or a relationship. Today, I'm only afraid of losing myself." My story doesn't end with a lavish wedding or dramatic revenge. It ends with an awakening. As a woman who canceled her wedding the day before and saved her own life, I want to leave a message for every person standing at the altar with the wrong person. Love alone is not enough without respect, transparency, and a sense of security. Don't compromise just for fear of age, loneliness, or gossip. I understood the importance of financial and emotional independence, and the importance of setting boundaries. Someone who truly loves you will not treat you as their financial backstop or a material resource. If you ever find yourself in such a situation, slow down and listen to your intuition.